Section 5, Tips on Discussing Difficult Topics with Children.
You know, I dealt with this as a professional for many, many years in the FBI as a so-called FBI profiler, and I learned a great deal about this. But yet in my own personal life, I struggled with this, I think, like any parent would, in trying to figure out how is the appropriate way to talk to your kids about these kinds of things. So yes, on a professional level, I knew certain things, but to apply it in my own situation with my own children wasn't an easy thing to do. I had the same problems about how do you talk to your kids about these things. You don't want to make them overly frightened, but you don't want to deny that it's going on. How do you strike a balance?
Talking about abduction and molestation with your child can seem very difficult. Parents everywhere share the same sentiment. I don't want to scare my kids.
Scaring children isn't the issue. Having other people scare children is the big issue. And if children are not prepared and they don't know that there are situations that are scary, then we are not serving our children well. We're not preparing them. Then we're creating real fear. It's like when you get into a car and you put on a seatbelt. The purpose of the seatbelt is not to scare a child or make them afraid of having an accident. If I say to a child, why do cars have seatbelts? They will say, it's to keep you safe, not so you don't get killed. They're not afraid, oh my gosh, I'm going to get in the car and I'm going to fly through the windshield. That's not it. They know that if they have a safety belt on, then they're safer. You know, knowledge is really power. The more you know, and the more aware you are, the more confident you are, the more confident a child is, and the more able they are to take care of themselves. Wisdom is wonderful. Naivete is foolhardy, and parents want to protect their children. Knowledge is protection.
The old adage of bringing up children was that children should be seen and not heard. And really, that kind of doesn't apply to the present-day world. We live in a modern, very complex world. Verbal and thinking skills are much more important than they were in the past. Competition for different prizes that society has to offer is very stiff, and children need to be very self-confident and have a very good sense of who they are inside.
Talking with children about safety doesn't scare them, but empowers them. The question is, how young do we start?
How you go about talking to your child depends on the age of the child, of course. Younger children, it's just easier to bring up this topic with. They're eager to learn about the world. There are lots of things that they don't know, and they're much less likely to just shut you down when you raise the topic.
Parents say, well, how old should a child be before I start talking to them like this? As young as possible. As soon as the child has any language at all, I would say, I am so proud that you picked up your toys. You should feel so proud of yourself. Did you feel proud when you shared with your friends? Anything that you can do to start communication, and you can do that with 2 or 3-year-olds, even before they have the words themselves, because they have a receptive vocabulary before they even can express themselves. You start communication as young as possible so that they have the language and the words and the freedom and the knowledge that they know you want to hear what they have to say. They're never too young.
It's an ongoing process of changing needs, and the parent needs to keep on communicating, keeping the channels of communication open with the child so they understand what the needs are and what the changing needs are.
Surprisingly, it's easier to talk to younger kids about safety as they're still eager to learn. So, how does one go about reaching out to their teens?
If you start communicating at a young age, then the teenage years don't have to be horrible. In my family personally, adolescence was the easiest time we had because we had to work so hard at communication when my kids were 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years of age. Communication starts young. That way, when kids get older, they have the language and the vocabulary. Teenagers think they know more than they do. They fake it till they make it. If you build your communication, and you can start at 15, you can start at 16. If you let kids know, I'm concerned, I understand that your friends are doing things that we're telling you not to do. However, I need to know that you are safe, and that is my priority. I've had kids come in here and say that the thing they like best about their parents is that they have rules. I know that sounds strange for a 16-year-old girl, but she said, my parents give me rules. I feel badly for my friends because their parents don't give them rules. And they were telling me how some of their friends use her rules and claim that their parents have put those rules on them because they are so starved for structure. Kids don't feel safe. They don't feel safe. They're not getting enough positive reinforcement, and teenagers go through that me, me, my, I'm the center of the universe stage, which 2-year-olds do. I mean, teenagers are terrible twos with hormones a lot of the time. They really are. So knowing that they're going to be fighting for freedom, let them earn it and let them know what is required for them to have that freedom. In other words, give your adolescents privileges depending on who they choose as friends, as an example. If they're with kids that are risky, high-risk kids, really pull in the limits. Really pull in the limits and let them know why. And let them know that if they want more privileges, they need to choose more responsible friends. The same thing with strangers. What are you and your friends going to do if? Why don't you have your friends come over and let's talk about it. I did that with my own teenagers. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about when you go to the mall. Let's talk about risky behavior. Malls are a magnet for teenagers and movie theaters, and so high risk, so high risk. If you communicate and you let kids know what's expected, again, knowledge is power.
One of the most common stereotypes that I think that Americans have about child abduction, sexually motivated child abduction, is that the victims are all little children, particularly little girls. What we know from the research is that the #1 victim is probably an adolescent girl, an older girl in her teen years, who's more likely to be victimized. So therefore, once again, that a lot of these strategies that are only targeted toward little kids are missing the main population. Also, it's very important, I think, that there maybe are more families who might talk to their daughters about this, but totally ignore the possibility of an abduction of their son. And although they're not as abducted as often, boys also get abducted, and in significant numbers. So you need to make sure you also talk to your son. And also, interesting enough, I found that it is more likely that if a boy gets abducted and sexually assaulted, he is probably less likely to come home and tell anybody about it. He's going to be ashamed and embarrassed that he, quote unquote, allowed himself to be victimized. So we need to recognize that boys are at risk and that older children are also at risk as we look at these numbers, and so we have to deal with that kind of reality.
When talking to your teens, role play and ask what-if questions. Keep in mind that teen boys also get abducted, and in significant numbers. To help keep your kids safe at any age, it's important to give your child confidence and boost their self-esteem.
One of the things that sometimes stands in the way of talking to children is that they think that by raising this issue, you're showing a lack of confidence in their judgment or their ability or their friends. So I think it's important to start out any conversation of that sort with things that show the confidence that you do have, the respect that you do have, so that they don't simply feel like this is a reflection of your concern about them.
Many children are not getting compliments today. They're not hearing the positives. They're hearing about what's wrong with them. I hear more and more about kids being lured on the internet. And a lot of the reason they're lured is because someone is saying just the right thing. Oh, you're pretty. Oh, you're smart. I really like the way you said this. And oh, that sounds so interesting. Sometimes that's the positive feedback they're getting. Now, children want positive feedback. They want recognition. They want to be made okay. And so they're going to go for that. If parents and teachers aren't being positive, kids are going to go where positive reinforcement occurs. So we have to be very, very careful. We have to be very careful to give kids lots of positives.
It's very important for kids to get the love and support they need at home. Predators know how to pay kids the compliments they're not getting. They also take the time to listen. Do you? Here's how both parents and kids can become better listeners.
It's not always easy to listen to your child when you have a million other things going on and the child comes to you and says, Mom, I want to tell you something about what happened today. And oftentimes the parent, and I know I'm guilty of this, will say, yeah, honey, yeah. But you're not really listening. And I think that parents need to intentionally listen to their children, to stop what they're doing, to take the time to actually look at the child and actually listen to what they're saying to an extent where they can actually repeat what the child has said to them.
How many times do parents come up and say, my child doesn't listen to what I say? It's so common. My kid never listens to me. Well, if you're going to say to them, don't talk to strangers, what would give you your first clue that the child might not be listening to you? Some children have learned the lesson of tuning out adults, because a lot of adults just chatter about all kinds of things and complain and tell the kids how bad they are, and the kids learn to tune it out because it's not productive. But if you say to a child, when you get into the car, you need to put on your seatbelt to keep you safe. And then you say, what did you hear me say about seatbelts? And you do it with a smile, not do it with a smile. And the child is likely to say, seatbelts keep me safe. And then you say, good job. Let me see you put on your seatbelt. And then you cheer them on, because children want positive recognition. And that's one way to give it to them, by asking the question and seeing if they heard you. That way you know if they did hear you or if they did not hear you, and you can repeat it or reword the statement so that the child does get the message and you know that they heard you.
Spending time with children is probably the most important thing that parents can do. Being open to what they have to say. Having a good relationship with a child is the best prevention, but of course having a good relationship with a child should be something parents strive for, not just to keep kids safe, but for having a happy family and helping their children to grow up and feel good about themselves.
Obviously, it is imperative to discuss child abduction with our kids. Here are some ways to bring up the subject and get the conversation going.
I think that there are a number of different ways that you can broach safety topics with children, and I think that parents need to take advantage of multiple means of doing that. One way to do that is to set aside specific time to actually talk to their child about the topic. It communicates to the child that this is an important topic. We're setting aside special time to actually talk about this. But maybe even more effective than that is to use teaching moments that come up just during the course of a normal day, and parents need to be attentive to those types of moments when those types of moments present themselves.
I'm sure everybody knows a half a dozen families, and I would like to see more schools do this. It isn't done nearly enough. And come up with situations and role play. You could have someone who you know, who the children don't know, drive up and hold a picture of an animal up and say, oh kids, come and help me, I've lost my dog. Come and take a look at his picture. And if the children go to the car, say stop and look where you are right now. Do you know this person? In other words, don't hash them out. Do you know this person? If you don't know this person, then this is a stranger. Should you get near their car? No. So when a stranger talks to you, like this stranger did, see you've got, they call it in vivo, in life, real life circumstances. They say, oh, we shouldn't have done it. And you don't yell at them for going up to the car, say, good for you. I know that's a mistake you're never going to make again, are you? Good job. So you're always finding something to compliment them for making a better decision, as opposed to hashing the kids out.
I make it an analogy to people that I'm teaching new skills to. I make it an analogous to learning, for example, to play a musical instrument like a piano or guitar, or learning to be a baseball player, a football player. Those are complex skills. And when we learn those kind of skills, we need to practice in a safe environment. A baseball player has somebody throwing pitches at him over and over again in a safe environment where he can think about what he's doing and correct his behavior, and somebody can coach him, well, why don't you try this and try that? So it's a place where you can experiment in a safe environment. And it's important to get those skills so it becomes automatic becomes almost unconscious, because when you're actually going to perform that skill, it's going to be in a setting that's not going to be as comfortable and as safe. The child, for example, may be accosted by a stranger. It's not safe, it's going to be scary. A baseball player is going to be there with a pitcher, an adversary who wants to strike him out, and 50,000 people who are going to be yelling and screaming, booing perhaps. So it's going to be a tremendous amount of pressure. Babe Ruth used to say, when they asked him how did he hit so many home runs, he said it was because he was very relaxed at the plate. And being relaxed, his mind was clear. He could then see the ball coming to him and it looked like a basketball. So a person that's very nervous, that baseball is going to look like a golf ball. So it's very important to have the skills so well learned that one is very, very, very confident. So in teaching the child these new skills, you repeat them over and over and reinforce the child, build the self-confidence so the child feels he's learned new skills and not being just frightened.
Like anything new, safety skills need to be learned, and repetition is key. It's also important that the learning takes place in a safe environment and that kids learn to perform the techniques in a relaxed state. Make this learning fun for your kids. Keep in mind, while this may be easier with children of an outgoing nature, shy children need these skills even more, as they are often a predator's preferred target.
Shy children, children who look reluctant, are most likely to be targeted, and that goes for teenagers. We know that adult rape victims also have that sense of shyness or withdrawal. People who walk tall and look assertive aren't bothered. This is important information. So if we rehearse children, I do that in my office. If a child is getting bullied, I teach them to use their words. And I teach them, again, the body language and how you talk to people, how you present yourself. And you get the words down, you get the tonal quality down, and then you get the body language down. As an example, if a child is bullying you by saying something that is inappropriate, I teach children to just sit up tall, look them in the eye and say, "You must be looking in the mirror." And we rehearse it and rehearse it and rehearse it. And then let me tell you that whoever the bully is the next day is done. But that's all it takes. So rehearsing these shy ones. Shy means you're looking into yourself and self-judgmental. The books on shyness teach you that. Their children are more introverted and more looking inside themselves. They're not as conscious of what's going on around them. So the first thing we need to do is draw those kids out. And if you can draw them out with words, vocal intonation, and body language, they're confident. And the more you do it, the better they get. Interestingly enough, some very, very shy children do an extraordinarily good job on the stage. You know, you give them a role and you let them be somebody else, and all of a sudden they're out there and they are really loving it. And that helps draw them out. But remember, they have a script, and that's where they get their confidence. So give the kids a script. I don't care how shy and self-conscious they are. If you teach them the skills of eye contact, body language, vocal tone, you've given them a gift.
There's a fine line here. Kids who act confident are less likely to be victimized. But on the other hand, if you have a sense that this is a dangerous situation, generally the best thing to do is to get away from it and not to use bravado to hang around something that might become serious.
It is necessary to get kids out of their shell and aware of their surroundings so they can recognize a potentially dangerous situation. But how do we help our children develop these instincts?
It's important for parents to tailor the message about trusting your instincts to their child and who their child is. Some children have a lot of fears, irrational fears, are very timid. They may need to have more information about how to distinguish truly dangerous situations from ones that just feel scary but aren't. Other kids tend to disregard dangerous situations and feel no fear at all. They may be the ones who need to learn much more about how to see when a slight increase in their sense of apprehensiveness needs to be acted on.
Some children have this intuitive feeling that there's something or somebody that doesn't make them comfortable. One of the things I would recommend that parents say to children is there something that made you feel good today? And then you can ask them a question like, was there anything that was really frustrating today? Was there anything really hard today at school? And they might talk about a math problem or something. And then you can lead into it and say, was there anything that made you feel scared or uncomfortable today? In other words, you're using feeling words. Now I really sound like a psychologist. You're giving them feeling words, and you're giving them permission to be observant and to be aware of their own personal reactions. Many children aren't. So by the time you've gotten to, did anything or anybody make you feel uncomfortable or a little bit scared, and you can use the body language, a little bit scared. Affect is good. They say that communication is 7% words and 93% nonverbal. So that's a real good thing, a little bit scared. And then the parent can say, was there anybody maybe on the playground that made you feel uncomfortable? In other words, don't dig right into the neighborhood. And the child might describe somebody who was a bully, and then you can go through what should you do if there's a bully. And then you can say, how about in the neighborhood? Any of our neighbors make you feel maybe a little bit kind of funny or not comfortable, or somebody you feel like you'd like to not be around? In other words, you're helping the child define it. Because very often kids have gut feelings, but they don't have words for it. So if we ask them questions in that manner, then we're opening the door to awareness. We're giving them a vocabulary, and then they can begin to express themselves.
When developing your child's instincts, remember to give them a vocabulary they can use to express themselves when they feel uncomfortable. An open line of communication is the most vital part of your child's safety education. But there are some other things parents can do that are essential to the protection of their children.
Parents often focus on the risk to children from outside the home, and they focus on trying to change children's behavior. But there's plenty of things that parents can do to keep kids safe by changing their own behavior, making sure that they don't respond violently and aggressively to children in the ways that they try to relate to them and discipline them, and making sure that they don't engage in violent interactions with their spouses and the other people that they're close to. In being careful about the people that they associate with, make sure that they don't bring into their children's lives somebody who may be predatory or may victimize a child. If parents really monitor those kinds of things, that will be a great step toward keeping kids safe.
Because of what I did for 30 years in the FBI, a lot of people come and ask me, well, gee, what would you tell parents, or what would you tell your kids, or what would you tell your grandkids and so on about this? And the problem is I don't have a simple answer. I mean, a lot of people are looking for, and I understand why they're looking for, what I sometimes jokingly call the 30-minute checkoff list, something that you can accomplish. Or sometimes when I talk to the media, they want a little sidebar that they can go with the story of certain things to do to protect your children. I also sometimes jokingly refer to it as kind of like the polio vaccine. You take your child to the pediatrician for a shot and then a booster shot, and then you don't have to worry about polio anymore. You don't think about it anymore. There is no polio vaccine to prevent sexual victimization of children. What it really is something that you have to be involved in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year for your child's entire life.